Hi everyone. So this is the first video that you're going to watch to help you learn the material in section 8.3. In front of you, you should have the worksheet that has the notes for this section that I posted in Canvas. So if you don't have that already, get that out. It's your 8.3 notes and practice worksheet. And what we're going to do is I'm going to first go through a couple of problems that are going to help you with the first section of that worksheet, which is just learning the basic structure for solving linear equations. And you'll notice at the top of that notes worksheet, I have a linear equation solving checklist. You don't have to use this checklist every time, but I do find that it helps students organize the process when they're solving these linear equations. And so I have two examples here that we're going to work through together that will model that process for you, so you can see how it helps break down the process for solving linear equations and finding the value of x. When we solve a linear equation for a variable, what we're trying to do is peel away the layers, take everything away from x, so that we get x by itself. And when we do that, we usually use opposite operations, okay? So the first step in your checklist says that we need to build a wall. What I mean by that is we're literally going to build a wall around that equal sign. You can either draw a line straight through the equal sign or a line on either side. But what we're trying to do here is we're trying to separate the left and the right side of that linear equation. And it's just going to help us be organized as we solve this equation. It's an organizational tool, okay? Your second step is to simplify the left and the right-hand side of the equal sign separately. And what we mean by that is we're going to distribute if there's distributing to be done, and we're also going to combine like terms before we start moving things from one side to the other. Okay, so I notice here on the left-hand side, I have some distributing to do. Whenever you see a number written right outside of the parentheses like this, attached directly to the parentheses, that means we're distributing. And this means we're taking -4 and multiplying it by everything inside of this parentheses. So I'm going to multiply the x by a -4 and the -3 by a -4. That 3 is negative. So we need to make sure we watch our signs as we multiply here. And so what I get when I distribute is a -4x. -4 times a -3 gives me a +12 plus x. And that equals my right side of the equation, which I haven't touched yet. Make sure as you're solving these equations that you write down even the parts that you haven't worked with yet. That will help keep things organized and help you not to lose terms along the way, okay? So I have distributed, and now I need to look to each side to see if I can combine like terms. I do have like terms that I can combine here on the left side. -4x plus a +x gives me a -3x. I'm going to bring down the +12. I haven't worked with that yet. And that equals 22 plus 2x. Again, no simplifying to do on the right side of that equation. There was no distributing and there's no like terms that I can combine. Once I'm to this point where both sides of my equation are simplified, now I want to start moving things around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect all of my x's on one side of the equal sign and all of my constants, my non-x terms, on the other side. And it doesn't matter which side of the equation you move your x terms and your constant terms to. One trick that you can use to help you out if you don't like using negative terms, and especially with your x terms, what I would suggest doing is move your x terms to the side of the equation that has the larger value. So for example here, I have a -3x and a +2x. +2 is larger than -3. I'm going to move those x terms over here and make my x term positive. How do I move things? By using the opposite operation. So if it's a -3x, I'm going to add 3x to both sides. What that does is it eliminates or undoes this -3x on the left side, because a -3x plus a +3x is 0. My x's went away, and they transferred to this side of the equal sign over here. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. What am I left with? Well, I have a positive 12 on the left side of my equal sign and a 22 plus 5x on the right side. I've got my x's on one side. Now I'm going to move the constants to the other. It's a positive 22. So to move that, I'm going to do the opposite, which is subtract 22 from both sides. And then what I have here on the left-hand side is a negative 10, because 12 minus 22 is negative 10, and a positive 5x on the right. Once I have my x's to one side and my constants to the other, the last step is to ask myself, who is still bothering x? That's the 5. How is it attached? It's 5 times x, so it's attached by multiplication. And so again, I undo that operation by doing the opposite. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I will divide both sides by 5, and I'll get a negative 2 is equal to x. This is the solution to my equation. Negative 2 is the number that I could plug in for x up here and make the left-hand side equal to the right-hand side. And you can always use that as a way to check your work. You can always take your answer, plug it back into the original equation, and it should work. It should make a true statement. Okay. This next example here I chose to do because it's a little bit more involved. And you might even notice it's problem number 2 on the exercises in that first section on your worksheet. So if you want to take a look at that and work through this along with me on your worksheet, that would be great. And you're going to notice there are some things we're going to talk about in this problem that might help you with number 3 on the worksheet. Okay? Solving the equation using my checklist, first step is to build a wall. Second step is to simplify the left and the right side, so that means I'm distributing and combining like terms. First of all, I have 3 spots, 1, 2, 3, where I'm distributing. What I'm going to want to make sure I do is watch my negative. In order to know whether a number or a term in an equation is positive or negative, we always look before the term to see what sign is attached to it, okay? So for example, before the 5, there's no sign, so we just assume it's positive. And the same with the 3, okay? Inside the parentheses here, before the 3, there's a plus sign. That's also a positive number or a positive term in the equation. But here, with the negative 2, it's a minus 2 times these parentheses. This indicates that the 2 is negative. So I'm going to need to make sure I distribute a negative 2 through the parentheses. Doing my distribution, on the left side, I have 10x plus 15 equals, for the first parentheses, on the right side, I have 12x plus 3. For the second parentheses on the right side, and again, remembering that I'm distributing a negative 2, I have negative 2 times a positive 3x, that's a minus 6x. And a negative 2 times a positive 2 is a minus 4. So my distributing is done. Now I'm going to combine like terms. Left side, no like terms to combine, so I'm just going to rewrite it. 10x plus 15. I want to make sure I rewrite that side so I don't forget about any of those terms later on. On the right side, terms I'm going to combine, 12x minus 6x. Again, I look before the term to know whether it's positive or negative, to know whether it's being added or subtracted. 12 minus 6x is 6x. Positive 3 minus 4 is a negative 1. So now I have simplified both sides of the equal sign. Now I'm going to start collecting variables on one side, constants on the other. I'm going to choose to move my variable terms to the left side because the 10x is bigger, and that way I won't have to work with a negative variable term. But you could very well do it the other way around. Okay? I'm going to move this 6x over to this side. It's a positive 6x, so I'm going to subtract it. And I'll be left with 4x plus 15 is equal to a negative 1. I'm going to move my positive 15 over to the right side by subtracting it. and I'm left with 4x is equal to a negative 1, take away 15 more is a negative 16. And now I'm at my last step. I have x's on one side, constants on the other. Who is still bothering x? 4 is. How is it attached? By multiplication. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Again, I'm going to pay attention to my negatives. I have a negative 16 divided by a positive 4. That means x is equal to a negative 4. And again, if you take this answer and plug it back in for x in the original equation, you will find that it makes a true statement. So hopefully this helps you work through the exercises in the first part of that notes worksheet. And you should do that now before moving on to the next set of videos, which deal with how do we solve equations that have decimals and fractions in them.